Imagine you're a hostage inside a bank and the criminal pointing a weapon at you. Instead of hating him, you start to trust him. Not only that, but you refuse to leave the bank and feel fear, not of the captor, but of the thought of being away from him. Do you think this is strange, illogical? But this is exactly what happened in one of the most bizarre bank robberies in history, an incident that baffled psychologists and is studied today in intelligence departments because it reveals a dangerous psychological secret, how an ordinary person can turn into an irresistible psychological force. In this video, you'll discover how true charisma is built and how your demeanor, silence, and way of appearing can make you an unforgettable and perhaps irresistible person. Watch until the end, because what awaits you in the final minutes isn't just psychological analysis, but a real mental weapon that will change the way you speak and even your presence in front of others. The Stockholm robbery story, the psychological miracle. On a quiet morning in August 1973, an armed man entered Kreditbanken in central Stockholm, Sweden. He carried a submachine gun, wore sunglasses, and appeared calm, but his eyes were anything but. He yelled at the employees, fired shots into the air, then took 4 hostages, 3 women and 1 man. The police quickly arrived and set up a security cordon around the bank. The threat was clear. No negotiation if the hostages were at risk. Hours passed, but something strange began to happen inside the bank. The hostages were no longer as afraid of him as they were initially. Instead, they began to feel that he was more humane than the police outside. They talked with him, sometimes laughed, and little by little, they began to see him as someone they could trust. One of the hostages later said, "We felt safe when he threatened us, but we were terrified at the thought of the police storming the place." After 6 full days of siege, the police stormed the bank and freed the hostages. The criminals surrendered peacefully, but the surprise wasn't there. It was in what happened next. The hostages didn't rejoice. Instead, they expressed deep sympathy for the captor. Some refused to testify against him, and one even visited him later in prison and considered him a true friend. This incident baffled psychologists worldwide. How could a person control the minds of their victims in such a way? How could the terror of a weapon transform into a feeling of trust? The answer began here, with a psychological phenomenon later named Stockholm Syndrome. Secret 1. Calm visual dominance. During a sensitive negotiation session between the police and the captor inside the Stockholm Bank, one of the negotiators noticed something strange. The captor didn't shout, didn't threaten much, but he never took his eyes off the hostages. He didn't look at them with anger, but with steadiness. A gaze that didn't blink much, as if he was telling them without words, "I see you well, and you know you can't hide from my mind." This wasn't just a look. It's one of the most powerful tools of psychological control, steady and calm eye contact. Psychology calls it dominant eye contact, and it's used in interrogation rooms and intelligence. Not to threaten, but to instill a sense of silent authority, trust, and superiority. Important note, I'm not telling you to act like a criminal, but sometimes what draws the most attention and instills gravitas doesn't come from physical strength or excessive talking, but from a person's ability to control their gaze, their silence, and their presence. How do you use this technique in your life? When you speak with someone, don't stare at them as if challenging them, and don't avert your gaze as if you're scared. Instead, look at them steadily, as if you're quietly reading their inner thoughts. Don't blink too much. Maintain a stable gaze as if you have all the time in the world. The less you speak and the more confident you are, the deeper and more powerful your gaze becomes. Many don't notice this secret, but it changes how people see you, from an ordinary person to a personality that commands without words. Secret 2. The calm tone of voice that disorients. When the police were negotiating with the captor inside the Stockholm Bank, the hostages' voices were clearly audible through the phone, but the criminal's voice was low, deep, and slow. He didn't shout, he didn't object much. Instead, he spoke as if he controlled all the time, as if the whole world revolved around his tone alone. One of the negotiators later said, "We didn't know who was in control, the police or him, and for some reason, even the hostages, who were supposed to be afraid of his voice, felt a sense of ease when he spoke. His voice reassured and frightened them at the same time. This isn't a coincidence. It's a real psychological phenomenon, studied under the name the power of calmness in vocal tone. Humans naturally associate a loud voice with weakness. A person who raises their voice frequently often feels fear or loss of control. But the exact opposite happens when a person speaks in a calm, slow, and confident tone, as if they possess an inner authority that needs no proof. This tone resembles what's used in advanced interrogation rooms and high-stakes political negotiations, where the goal is to subdue an opponent without instigating direct conflict. How do you use this weapon in your life? When speaking in a situation that requires strength, never raise your voice. Instead, slow your pace, articulate your words in short sentences, and leave pauses of silence between them. For example, instead of saying, "No, that's unacceptable," calmly say, "I will not accept that." Then just be silent. The silence after a low tone creates genuine confusion in the other person because they expect a strong reaction and are instead met with a silent yet authoritative response. This is the difference. Shouting might scare for a moment, but calmness slowly terrifies and its impact lasts. And because this tone disorients the person in front of you and psychologically subdues them, it's still used today in interrogation rooms. Not to torture the body, but to confuse the mind. Secret 3. Silent withdrawal. On the third day of the siege inside the bank, after long hours of pressure and negotiations, something strange happened. The criminal completely stopped talking. He no longer threatened. He didn't ask for anything. He didn't shout. He just sat quietly, looking around as if nothing warranted a reaction. The police thought something was wrong, but inside the bank, the hostages began to feel a different kind of tension. The captor, who had filled the air with his words, suddenly retreated into his silence. The result? Everyone began to anticipate his every move, every glance, every pause, every sigh. It was as if his presence became stronger when his voice disappeared. This is what psychologists call the power of strategic withdrawal. Humans naturally fear sudden silence, unexplained pauses, and the person who suddenly disappears without a word, leaving behind a void that is not easily filled. In interrogation rooms, this method is frequently used. When the interrogator suddenly falls silent and leaves a suspect alone in the room, tension begins, and the mind starts concocting scenarios, because ambiguity unnerves more than confrontation. How do you use this psychological weapon in your life? When you feel that the conversation is losing its impact, stop. When you face someone who oversteps their boundaries, don't respond directly. Withdraw for a moment. Be silent. Take a step back. Your sudden pause is not weakness. It's an indirect declaration that you are in control. Because a powerful person doesn't always rush in. They know when to speak and when to withdraw, letting silence speak for them. If you're in a discussion, don't continue talking just because you're enthusiastic. Stop suddenly. Look at the other person and give a slight smile, then be silent. These few seconds might make the other person completely reevaluate because you didn't confront them. You disconcerted them with your withdrawal. Withdrawal is sometimes the most powerful message you can send. This technique is used not only by criminals, but by negotiators, officers, corporate leaders, and even intelligence agencies, because those who know how to disappear know how to return with irresistible force. Secret 4. Kindness within threat. In the final days of the siege, one of the hostages defended the captor to the police, saying he didn't harm us, but treated us more kindly than some of those outside. One hostage even feared the police would kill him and shouted, "Don't hurt him! He's a respectable human being." This behavior resulted from one of the most dangerous psychological tricks, the integration of threat and apparent mercy. In the last days of the Stockholm robbery, the captor was in a position of power. He carried a weapon, holding hostages. But he wasn't violent as everyone expected. Instead, he began to act with strange kindness. He would hand them food. He'd ask if they felt cold. He'd tell them stories. He even joked with them sometimes. This behavior psychologically confused the hostages. They were in a terrifying situation. Yet the party supposedly causing their fear began to transform in their minds into a source of safety. Psychologists explain this as deliberate contradiction. When a person shows two contradictory faces at the same time, this contradiction not only causes confusion, but pushes the mind to create an emotional bond with the person who holds power because they appear more humane than others, even while being the captor. This method can be used in your daily life. When you are in a position of power or influence, show a side of mercy, calmness, or tenderness at a time when everyone expects only strictness from you. This doesn't mean becoming weak, but keeping people in a state of continuous anticipation, unsure of exactly who you are. And this ambiguity is one source of gravitas. The captor in the Stockholm story didn't unnerve them with threats. He unnerved them when he acted as a kind human being at the worst possible moment. This paradox is what allowed him to control their minds even after the story ended. What made this incident different from any traditional robbery was that it wasn't just a confrontation between the police and the captor, but a silent war within the minds of the hostages themselves. 6 days inside the bank were enough for everything to change. The captor was no longer a clear enemy, but gradually became a familiar person who could be reasoned with. He was clever. He didn't rely solely on violence. Instead, he used a complex method of indirect threat, combined with calculated doses of kindness and care. He knew when to terrorize and when to reassure, when to be silent and when to smile. This contradiction confused the hostages and put them in a complex psychological state that made them attached to the person who was supposed to be the source of their terror. Even after the siege ended, they didn't act like victims. They defended him and sometimes even considered him better than the police officers. Summary of the 4 psychological secrets. After 6 days of siege, and in one of the strangest robbery stories in history, 4 dangerous psychological secrets emerged before us. These are still used today in interrogation rooms, intelligence agencies, and even in daily conversations to create gravitas and instill charisma without a single extra word being said. Secret 1, calm eye contact. Don't stare as if threatening, and don't avert your gaze as if you're scared. Instead, look with steadiness and calmness, as if you see what others don't. This gaze unnerves, silences, and commands instant respect. Secret 2, the calm, controlling tone of voice. Don't raise your voice to prove your point. Instead, lower your tone and speak slowly, because a person who holds control doesn't need to prove it with words. Secret 3, tactical withdrawal. Sometimes silence after speaking is more powerful than speech itself. Your brief withdrawal in a moment of tension makes the person in front of you completely reevaluate, because sudden absence is more unnerving than continuous presence. Secret 4, kindness within threat. When you show a humane side in a moment of tension or fear, you plant a conflict in the other person's mind that they won't forget. They begin to see something in you they can't explain, and this contradiction is the secret to silent emotional influence. Conclusion: the power of understanding and responsibility. These psychological secrets are not lessons in deception, but keys to understanding how strong presence, silent charisma, and unforgettable gravitas are built. This incident was not just a bank robbery, it was a complete psychological infiltration of the minds of 4 hostages, making them change their attitudes, emotions, and even their loyalty in favor of the person who was supposedly threatening their lives. The protagonist of the story is named Jan-Erik Olsson, and the location is Kreditbanken in Stockholm in 1973. What this man did was not studied in a university, but was later classified as one of the most dangerous psychological phenomena in the world, Stockholm Syndrome. And if you want to delve deeper, search for his name, read his story, and you'll understand why this incident is still studied today, not as a crime, but as a lesson in mind control without violence. We do not promote these types of behaviors, nor do we offer this content to teach you how to become frightening or manipulative. Rather, it is because these incidents contain deep psychological secrets that reveal how humans think and how your gaze, your tone, and your presence can transform into real tools that create gravitas and make people listen without you even asking. And if you've reached this point, you are a different person, someone who doesn't just watch, but thinks, analyzes, and reads between the lines. And I am closely observing who stays until the end, because these are exactly the people I address in future videos. So tell me in the comments, do you like this type of story? And do you appreciate this style of psychological analysis? Write your opinion, not just so I know if you liked what you saw, but to understand how intelligent minds interact with this type of content. Some words reveal a lot, even without you intending them to. And hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you are the type who wants to know more, not the type who settles for the superficial. Because what I'm working on now isn't just a new video. It's something stronger, deeper, and stranger. Something that's quietly brewing, but it will reach you exactly when you are ready for it. See you in the strongest part.